Picture yourself standing in the Egyptian desert at Giza. Before you rises a mountain of stone, 481 feet tall, perfectly geometric, assembled from 2.3 million stone blocks, the Great Pyramid of Cheops. You've been told a story, a convenient, comfortable story. Around 4,500 years ago, in 2560 BC, a pharaoh named Cheops commanded the construction of this monumental tomb. Tens of thousands of slaves, armed with copper tools and wooden sleds, worked for 20 years, day and night. They transported each individual block from quarries located miles away. They lifted these multi-ton stones to a height equivalent to a modern 40-story skyscraper. And they did all this to bury a single man whose mummy was never found inside the pyramid. This story is repeated in every museum. It's taught in textbooks. It's delivered by Egyptologists with the authority of decades of study. But now, pull out your calculator, open your eyes to the raw facts. Forget the romantic narratives about the pharaoh and his eternal glory. Think, not with emotions, but with logic, not with faith, but with mathematics. The official version claims the Great Pyramid contains 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs an average of 2.5 tons. Some granite blocks in the king's chamber weigh up to 80 tons. The entire structure weighs an estimated 6 million tons. Construction time is estimated at 20 years, based on historical records of the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited the pyramid 2,000 years after its supposed construction. Let's start with the simplest calculation. 2.3 million stone blocks divided by 20 years. That's 115,000 blocks per year. Divide that by 365 days. That's 315 blocks per day, every single day, for 20 years straight. No breaks, no days off, no consideration for weather, illness, or death. But it gets more absurd. Assume the workers work 10 hours per day during daylight. 315 blocks divided by 10 hours equals 31.5 blocks per hour. That's more than one block every 2 minutes. Imagine that. Every 2 minutes, a 2.5-ton stone block must be quarried, processed, transported several miles, lifted to the appropriate level of the pyramid, and placed with millimeter precision. 2 minutes for a process that modern construction equipment with cranes, trucks, and computer-aided planning couldn't accomplish any faster. But the ancient Egyptians had no trucks. They had no cranes. They had no computers. They had copper tools, wooden sleds, and muscle power. The official explanation for this logistical miracle: mass mobilization of labor, hundreds of thousands of people working in coordination. Pick up your calculator again. Let's calculate the number of workers needed to maintain this production rate. A stone block must be quarried. Modern tests have shown that breaking a 2.5-ton limestone block with copper tools requires at least a full workday, probably longer. But let's be generous. Say an experienced team of 5 quarrymen can break 1 block per day. To produce 315 blocks per day, you need 315 teams. That's 1,575 quarrymen. Then each block must be processed. The surfaces must be smoothed, the edges precisely cut. Another day's work per block, minimum. Another 1,575 stonemasons. Then the block must be transported. The nearest limestone quarry is half a mile from the pyramid. But many blocks came from farther away. The granite blocks in the king's chamber came from Aswan, over 500 miles up the Nile. Let's focus on the short-haul transport, the half-mile from quarry to pyramid. A 2.5-ton block on a wooden sled pulled by workers across sand and gravel. Modern experiments have shown that at least 50 men are required to move such a block. 315 blocks per day means 15,750 men doing nothing but pulling blocks. Then the blocks must be lifted onto the pyramid. Official theory speaks of ramps, long ramps made of mud and wood, built in a spiral around the pyramid. But calculate the volume of such a ramp. To reach the top of the pyramid, a ramp with a gradient of 1 to 10, the maximum slope workers can manage with heavy loads, would need to be nearly a mile long. The volume of such a ramp would be greater than the volume of the pyramid itself. You would have had to move more material to build the ramp than was needed for the pyramid, and afterward you'd have to dismantle the entire ramp and dispose of the material. Where is this material? Where are the traces of these gigantic ramps? They don't exist. Nowhere in the archaeological record. Alternative theories propose internal ramps, corridors within the pyramid itself. But that's even more absurd. The internal corridors of the pyramid are narrow, often less than 3 feet wide. How do you pull a 2.5-ton block through a 3-foot wide corridor? How do you maneuver around corners? How do you coordinate hundreds of teams working simultaneously in a dark, dusty labyrinth? And we haven't even talked about the granite blocks yet. The king's chamber, the central heart of the pyramid, 200 feet above ground, consists of massive granite blocks, each weighing between 25 and 80 tons. These blocks were transported from Aswan, 500 miles away. Imagine the transport. An 80-ton block on a wooden raft on the Nile. The raft itself would have to be built from hundreds of tree trunks. It would have to be constructed to carry this load without capsizing. Then, after arriving at Gizeh, this block must be lifted 200 feet. How? Official science has no satisfactory answer. They say levers, pulleys, ramps. But lifting an 80-ton block with levers would require levers that themselves weigh several tons and are operated by hundreds of men. And even then, how do you position it with millimeter precision on the ceiling of a chamber? The ceiling of the king's chamber consists of 9 granite beams, each weighing over 50 tons. These beams form one level, and above them are 5 more relieving chambers, each with its own massive beams. In total, over 40 granite beams, each 50 to 70 tons, arranged perfectly horizontally, perfectly balanced. Modern engineers with hydraulic cranes and computer calculations would struggle to build such a structure. But that's not all. The precision is the real mystery. The base of the Great Pyramid is an almost perfect square. The side lengths vary by less than 8 inches over a distance of 755 feet. That's an accuracy of less than 0.1%. The corners are almost perfect right angles, deviating by less than 4 arcminutes. That's a deviation of less than 0.07 degrees. How do you measure that? How do you achieve this precision? Hey, modern surveying engineers use laser theodolites, GPS, and computer-aided calculations to achieve such accuracies. The ancient Egyptians allegedly had sticks, ropes, and sightlines. Try it yourself. Try surveying a square with 755-foot sides to an accuracy of 8 inches using only ropes and wooden stakes. It's impossible. The alignment of the pyramid is another mystery. The pyramid is almost perfectly aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. The north side deviates by only 3.4 arcminutes from true north. That's an accuracy difficult to achieve even with modern compasses. And remember, compasses weren't brought to Europe until the Middle Ages. The ancient Egyptians had no compasses. They would have had to determine north using the stars at night, then transfer that direction to daytime to guide construction. But wait, there's more. The internal chambers and corridors of the pyramid are also of astonishing precision. The ascending corridor leading to the grand gallery is 128 feet long and rises at an angle of 26 degrees. The walls of the corridor are perfectly smooth, the ceiling perfectly level. The corridor varies in width by less than half an inch over its entire length. The grand gallery itself is an architectural marvel. It's 154 feet long and 28 feet high, with a ceiling constructed in 7 overlapping layers, each layer offset inward by a few inches. This construction, known as corbelling, distributes the weight of the stone masses above, but the precision is breathtaking. Every stone fits perfectly without mortar, with joints so tight that a razor blade can't fit between them. Let's talk about the tools now. Official Egyptology claims the ancient Egyptians used copper tools. Copper is a soft metal, softer than iron, much softer than steel. Try cutting limestone with a copper chisel. You'll find that the copper wears down faster than the stone. After a few strikes, your chisel is dull and useless. For granite, copper is even more unsuitable. Granite is one of the hardest rocks, a mixture of quartz, feldspar, and mica. Quartz has a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale. Copper has a hardness of 3. It's physically impossible to cut a harder material with a softer one. It would be like trying to cut steel with butter. The official explanation: they used copper saws with sand as an abrasive. Experiments have been conducted. Archaeologists have tried cutting granite with copper saws and sand. It works, but incredibly slowly. Cutting 1 centimeter deep into granite takes hours. The saw constantly wears down. The sand must be constantly renewed, and the result is a rough, uneven surface, far from the smooth, polished surfaces seen in the king's chamber. But look at the king's chamber. The granite blocks aren't just smooth, they're polished. They gleam. Some surfaces are so smooth you can see your reflection in them. How do you polish granite to a mirror finish? Today we use diamond grinding machines rotating at high speeds. The ancient Egyptians allegedly had sand and patience. Try it. Take a piece of granite and a bag of sand. Rub the sand on the granite. After hours, after days, you'll see a slight improvement in the surface. To achieve a mirror-smooth polish would take months, maybe years per block, and the king's chamber has dozens of such blocks. There are more mysteries. In the pyramid, there are drill holes, precise circular holes drilled into granite. Some of these holes are up to 12 inches deep. The drill marks show a spiral groove like that produced by a modern drill. Experiments have shown that these holes must have been made at a feed rate of over 0.08 inches per revolution. That's astonishing. Modern diamond drills operated with power tools achieve feed rates of about 0.02 inches per revolution in granite. How did the ancient Egyptians, without electricity, without steel drills, without diamonds, achieve a feed rate 4 times higher? Official science has no answer. They say, perhaps they used some kind of drill with embedded gemstones. Perhaps. But where are these drills? Where are the tools? None have ever been found. Let's talk about the workers now. The official version says they were slaves, but recent archaeological finds suggest otherwise. Workers' settlements have been discovered near the pyramids. These settlements suggest that workers were well fed, received medical care, and even received some form of payment. They weren't slaves, but paid workers. Fine. Paid workers. How many? Estimates vary wildly from 10,000 to 100,000. Let's take the middle estimate, 50,000 workers. These workers must be fed. A worker needs at least 3,000 calories per day, more with hard physical labor. 50,000 workers times 3,000 calories equals 150 million calories per day. That's equivalent to about 60 tons of food per day. 60 tons. Every day. For 20 years. Where did this food come from? Egypt was an agricultural society dependent on the annual flooding of the Nile. Harvests were limited. To provide 60 tons of food per day, vast agricultural areas would have had to be reserved exclusively for pyramid workers. But where are the records of these agricultural operations? Where are the silos, the storage facilities? Some have been found, but nowhere near enough for 20 years of operation. And then there's water. 50,000 workers in the desert. Each worker needs at least 1.3 gallons of water per day, probably more with hard work in the heat. 50,000 times 1.3 gallons equals 65,000 gallons per day. Where did this water come from? The Nile is far away. How did they transport 65,000 gallons of water daily? Where are the traces of water pipes, wells, cisterns? There's another problem, waste. 50,000 people produce enormous amounts of waste. Human excrement, garbage, animal carcasses, if they used animals for food or labor. Where was this waste disposed of? In the desert, it would accumulate, spread disease, make the area uninhabitable. But there are no archaeological traces of massive waste dumps near the pyramids. The official story also makes a strange claim. The pyramid was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Cheops. But Cheops' mummy was never found in the pyramid. In the king's chamber stands an empty granite sarcophagus. No lid, no inscriptions, no signs of a burial. The official explanation, grave robbers stole everything. But how do grave robbers steal a mummy and leave behind a multi-ton granite sarcophagus? How do they remove all inscriptions, all decorations, all traces of a burial? Compare this to other Egyptian royal tombs. King Tutankhamun's tomb was full of treasures, inscriptions, wall paintings depicting the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Every royal tomb is decorated, inscribed, personalized. But the Great Pyramid? Nothing. No hieroglyphs in the inner chambers, no wall paintings, no decorations, just empty stone rooms. Is this a tomb, or is it something else? Consider the architecture from another perspective. The pyramid has three main chambers: the underground chamber, deep below the pyramid, the queen's chamber, roughly at mid-height, and the king's chamber, higher up. These chambers are connected by a complex system of corridors and shafts. The shafts are particularly puzzling. 4 narrow shafts lead from the king's chamber and queen's chamber to the outside. They're precisely constructed, with smooth walls and constant angles. The official explanation: air shafts. But why does a dead burial need air? And why are these shafts aligned with specific stars? The northern shaft of the king's chamber points to the pole star. The southern shaft points to Orion's belt. Some researchers have suggested the pyramid had an astronomical function, perhaps an observatory or calendar. But that doesn't explain the enormous effort, the millions of tons of stone, the decades of labor. You don't build an observatory from 2.3 million stone blocks. What if the pyramid had a completely different function? What if it was a power plant? That sounds absurd, but listen. In the 1970s and 1980s, some engineers and physicists proposed a theory. The Great Pyramid was a device for energy generation. The internal structure, the chambers, the shafts, the materials, everything points to a machine, not a tomb. The theory goes like this. The underground chamber was a reservoir for a chemical, perhaps hydrochloric acid. The queen's chamber contained another chemical, perhaps zinc. When these chemicals were mixed, they produced hydrogen. The hydrogen rose through the shafts and reacted in the king's chamber with other materials to generate energy. The granite blocks, which contain quartz, could have piezoelectric properties that convert mechanical vibrations into electrical energy. Sound crazy? Maybe. But it explains some things. It explains why the pyramid had to be so massive. To contain the vibrations and pressure, it explains why the materials were so carefully selected: granite for its piezoelectric properties, limestone for its insulating properties. It explains why there are no decorations. It was a machine, not a tomb. And it explains another anomaly: the salt deposits. Salt deposits have been found in the inner chambers of the pyramid, especially on the walls and ceilings. Where does this salt come from? The official explanation: moisture from groundwater, but the pyramid is built on a rock plateau, well above the groundwater level. If the pyramid was a chemical power plant, however, these salt deposits could be residues from chemical processes. Of course, official Egyptology rejects this theory. They call it pseudoscience. But they offer no better explanations for the anomalies. They say it was a tomb and ignore all contradictions. Why? Perhaps because acknowledging that the pyramid was a machine would mean the ancient Egyptians had advanced technological knowledge, and that would call into question the entire narrative of human history. But there's an even deeper reason. What if the ancient Egyptians didn't build the pyramid at all? What if they found it already standing, already ancient? There are clues pointing in this direction. The Sphinx, standing beside the pyramids, shows signs of water erosion. Water erosion in a desert. The last time enough rain fell in this region to cause such erosion patterns was over 7,000 years ago, long before the supposed emergence of Egyptian civilization. Some geologists have suggested the Sphinx could actually be much older than previously thought. And if the Sphinx is older, the pyramids might be too. Imagine this scenario. 10,000 or 12,000 years ago, an advanced civilization existed. They had technologies we don't fully understand today. They built massive structures around the world, not just in Egypt, but also in South America, Asia, on Pacific islands. These structures had functions: power plants, communication stations, perhaps even defense systems. Then a catastrophe occurred, perhaps a comet impact, perhaps a global flood, perhaps a pole shift. This civilization was destroyed. Their cities were buried, their people died, or were reduced to primitive conditions. The survivors had no memory of the old technologies, only vague myths and legends. Millennia passed. New civilizations emerged from the ruins. The ancient Egyptians discovered the pyramids, already standing, already ancient. They didn't understand their function. They saw only massive, impressive structures. They decided such structures must be worthy of gods or kings. So they declared the pyramids to be royal tombs. They tried to imitate them, built their own pyramids, but much smaller, much less precise. Look at the other Egyptian pyramids built after Cheops. The Pyramid of Khafre, the Pyramid of Menkaure. They're smaller, their internal structure is simpler, their precision is lower. It's as if the builders were trying to copy something they didn't fully understand. And the even later pyramids, built in the 5th and 6th dynasties, are even more primitive. Some are just ruins now, collapsed, because they weren't built with the same technique. That's the pattern of decay, not progress. The oldest pyramids are the best. The newer ones are worse. That's the opposite of what you'd expect if a civilization were learning and improving. It's as if the early Egyptians had access to knowledge or technology that was later lost. But if this is true, who were these ancient builders? Where did they come from? The answer is lost, buried under sand and time. But there are clues in myths and legends. Cultures around the world have stories of an advanced civilization before the flood. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky to earth. The Greeks told of Atlantis, an island with advanced technology that sank in a catastrophe. The Indians have stories of Vimanas, flying machines piloted by the gods. Are these just myths? Or are they distorted memories of real events, of a real civilization? Official science dismisses such ideas. They say myths are just stories, fantasies of primitive peoples. But what if the primitives weren't so primitive? What if they were the heirs of a great legacy they no longer fully understood? And here it gets dark. If the pyramids are remnants of an ancient advanced civilization, why isn't this widely accepted? Why does the academic world insist on the tomb theory despite all contradictions? The answer is control. Control over the narrative of human history. The established history tells us humanity developed linearly, from hunters and gatherers to farmers to first cities to kingdoms to empires. There were no great leaps, no lost civilizations. Everything is orderly, predictable, understandable. This story serves a purpose. It makes us believe that modern civilization is the pinnacle, that we are the most advanced there have ever been. But if there was a more advanced civilization before us, this narrative collapses. It raises questions. What happened to them? Could the same happen to us? Did they have knowledge we've lost? Should we focus more on the past than the future? These questions are dangerous. They destabilize the established order, so they're suppressed. Look at what happens to researchers who propose alternative theories. They're ridiculed, their careers ruined, their work censored. Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, John Anthony West, all have proposed theories diverging from established Egyptology. All have been branded as pseudo-scientists, their work ignored or mocked. Not because their theories have been scientifically disproven, but because they challenge the establishment. And then there's control over the sites themselves. The Egyptian government and academic community strictly control who has access to the pyramids, what research may be conducted. Many areas are closed to independent researchers. Why? Officially, to protect the sites, but perhaps also to control what is discovered, what is published. There have been reports of secret chambers in the Great Pyramid, of tunnels not yet opened. In the 1990s, a robot sent into one of the shafts discovered a door with copper handles. What's behind it? Authorities eventually allowed the door to be opened. Behind it was another door. The research was then stopped. Why? What don't they want the world to see? Consider the Great Pyramid from a global perspective, too. It's not alone. Around the world stand massive stone structures built with techniques ancient peoples supposedly shouldn't have had. In South America stand Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman, with stones fitted so perfectly no mortar is needed. In Baalbek, Lebanon, are stones weighing over 800 tons, the largest work stones in the world. How were they moved? In Japan are the Yonaguni structures, underwater archaeological sites that look man-made. If they are, they're over 10,000 years old, from a time when sea levels were lower. In Turkey is Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex dated to 11,000 years ago, erected by a society that supposedly hadn't even discovered agriculture yet. All these sites raise the same questions: how, why, who? And established archaeology has no satisfying answers. It offers guesses, theories often full of holes, but it refuses to consider more radical ideas. Why? Because acknowledging that our ancestors were more advanced than we thought would bring down the entire edifice of academic history. And now, back to the Great Pyramid. Let's finally summarize all the anomalies: the impossible construction time, the inexplicable precision, the tools that shouldn't work, the missing records, the empty tomb, the chemical residues, the alignment with the stars, the similarity to other worldwide structures. Each individual anomaly could be explained if you're creative enough. But altogether, they form a pattern suggesting we don't know the full story, that our ancestors had secrets, that the pyramid is more than a tomb. Perhaps it was a power plant. Perhaps it was an astronomical instrument. Perhaps it was a monument of a civilization we've forgotten. Or perhaps it was all of that and more. What can you do with this information? You can ignore it. You can return to the comfortable official version, or you can start asking questions. Visit the pyramids if you can. See them with your own eyes. Measure, touch, feel. Read the alternative theories. Not to believe them blindly, but to understand there's more than one perspective. Demand transparency from authorities. Why are certain areas closed? What's in the unopened chambers? Why is research controlled? Share this information. Discuss it. The more people ask questions, the harder it becomes to hide the truth. The Great Pyramid is more than a pile of stones. It's a mystery, a testimony, perhaps a warning. It has stood for millennia and will stand for millennia more, long after our modern civilization has turned to dust. Whatever its true story is, it deserves to be explored, not with prejudices, but with an open mind. The stones don't lie. Mathematics doesn't lie. Physics doesn't lie. Only people lie. And they've lied to us about the pyramid, either out of ignorance or intentionally. It's time to seek the truth. Not the comfortable truth in textbooks, but the uncomfortable truth hidden in the stones themselves. Subscribe to this channel. Share this information. Research for yourself. The pyramid is waiting. Its secrets are still there, buried, hidden, but not destroyed. And with every person who asks questions, with every researcher who doesn't give up, with everyone willing to look behind the official version, we come a step closer to the truth. The pyramid isn't just a monument of the past. It's a key to the future, a key to understanding who we really are, where we come from, and perhaps where we're going. But this key is denied to us by those who control the past to control the present. Don't let them continue to control. Seek the truth. The pyramid has waited 4,500 years. It can wait a little longer. But can you